Sup, y'all? My name is Evan Strong. This is In the Image Clothing Company Podcast, episode 141. I'm the founder of In the Image Clothing Company. This episode is actually titled Physically Impossible, because what I'll do here is actually run over a few things where, as human beings, there are things that are just physically impossible for us. I phrase things often as there's nothing impossible with our God. When I talk about how things just can't happen, but then obviously, meaning if you know who God is, who we discuss here under In the Image Clothing Company podcast, Jesus Christ, right? That's the point of this, is having discussions on the gospel of Jesus Christ, aka the truth of all things. We're all human beings on the same earth. We have one God, and so I discuss him as he says that he is, and I will never do that perfect, but there are some things that are just physically impossible for us as physical beings, being a human beings, right? Just bodies of flesh and bone on an earth. And often people think that they can just do whatever they want. So I'll go over a few things here, mostly to just give some insight on, there are some things that just will never happen because of things like the law of gravity, because our bodies are just a mechanical machine, okay? Which is a video under the main site of In the Image Clothing Company. So I'll talk about these things, but I'll talk about each of the four sides of In the Image Clothing Company, where clothing sits, and then we'll get into the discussion as I lay these out, okay? That's how we do this. I'll play a little bit of guitar here on Red the Guitar, my little Johnson JG 610R, 3/4 size with nylon strings, because I'm Evan Strong and I do crazy things with nylon strings, okay? So I'm trying to think of something that I haven't really played in quite a long time, and I'm going to go just no capo. I'll play like that. Just kind of up and down the neck a little bit, no capo. It has not been a common thing for me lately to use no capo on the guitar when I play, so there you go. Metronome Madness, dude. Check out that on In the Image Clothing Company Music, which is one of the other fours that I'll talk about first, I guess. In the Image Clothing Company Music, one of our four, let's do In the Image Clothing Company. I show the sizing and setup of guitars to not alter the body, because our hands are doing fine little motor skills, and there's only one way our hands could ever work, and our hands are essentially our shoulders, just as our feet are essentially our hips. Things that happen at the hands travel through the whole body. So, but also I make music and place it on In the Image Clothing Company Music. Okay, cool stuff too. I'm a good guitarist. I'm a lyricist, brother. So that's what I'm saying. We're on episode 6 of what I title Metronome Madness, where I go off the top with no metronome and no planned out anything, and just do a lot of wordplay, and it's really cool. Okay, that's a pretty new series as of last week. Actually, it's only about a week old. Okay, so we have another fourth of us, the main side of In the Image Clothing Company. That's where it all started. That's really what we do, is allow the human body to work. We're just a mechanical machine placed onto a rock in space, and so a lot of this discussion will be really, relating toward what we do on the main side of In the Image Clothing Company. I talk about the anatomy of the human body in depth. I know it well, and I understand that there truly is only one way the human body could ever work. It doesn't matter if you're fat or skinny, if you're a man or woman, if you're tall or short, whatever age you are. Just like when I talk about where clothing sits, I say things like that. It doesn't matter who you are, right? But clothing has to stay centered, fit correct, and ideally be made from 100% natural materials, because the human being is as well. And we're on an earth. There are laws like gravity, and the body's just a machine. I made a video, as I was saying, right, that I titled The Human Body is Just a Mechanical Machine. It's on the main side of In the Image Clothing Company, at least as of now, okay? And I'm, foreseeing it stay there, right? It's probably going to be staying there, is what I mean. The point being, though, there's rotations in the body. There's a neutral to every joint. There's just hinges, and the body just has a lever system, like the elbow, like the knees, like the hips. Even the wrists and the ankles, they're levers, but they also have a lot of other motion in them, but it could only ever do what it does. It's just a physical machine. So that's going to be, like I'm saying, a lot of what this discussion will be is things that are just physically impossible for us as human beings. On an earth that has a modern man-made society and world where people try to claim that they can get themselves to do things, that they're so in charge of things and in control of things, that they have a say over things, and we don't. God is above all. God's the designer of the human body, designed in the image of Jesus Christ as our bodies. That's where In The Image Clothing Company's 5-word name as a whole comes from. Okay? There's things that are physically impossible for us out of our own doings as human beings, and always will be in this life. But then God can do whatever he needs to, using us as vessels, and, things like Moses parting the Red Sea, for example, right? That can happen. But it wasn't Moses that did it. It was God working through him. So, yeah. Anyway, eating, sleeping, standing, sitting, walking, hydration, breathing, because that's the thing, again, physical things on a physical earth and a physical body. We talk about how to do all these things naturally, okay? Now, the other fourth to mention is In The Image Clothing Company poodles. We specialize in purebred standard poodles. We will be breeding them, properly registering them under the AKC, the American Kennel Club, okay? Giving dogs birth certificates and advocating for the importance of that, so we know bloodlines of dogs and how to further good, healthy dogs rather than having more dogs end up in shelters than would otherwise be needing to, okay? And we do a lot more than that, okay? Letting dogs stay natural is our slogan. Poodle parade events are beautiful events that we will be having where you can bring your standard miniature toy, any size, of purebred poodle and or poodle mix, like Bernie doodles, right? Golden doodles, Labradoodles, poodle mixes. And we'll get together, okay? In the state of Utah, the United States of America, that's where In The Image Clothing Company is based. A lot of nature stuff, outdoor things, Clean the Creek poodle parade events where we will actually clean up the environment, taking trash out of rivers and waterways where the dogs can come. I'll give a lot of information on dogs, letting them stay natural, helping them navigate environments they're not otherwise in, just having a good time too. Dogs like to be around other dogs. Owners of dogs like other owners of dogs usually, okay, and making new friends. Lots of information will be given, as I said, okay, there. Just kind of like naturally. It's not going to necessarily be like, I'm going to stand there and just spout off a bunch of facts. But just, coming together, we'll be able to share all that we know about that. Yeah, natural. The goal is for all four sides of In The Image Clothing Company, okay? So there you go. Clothing for everybody has to sit in the same location because, as I said, it's not about what I say, but that's the truth. The human body is just a mechanical machine placed onto a rock in space, okay? If you are a man or woman, tall or short, skinny or fat, any age, any part of the earth, or from any time period to ever be, you're a human being. Basically meaning anybody to ever live, your clothing has to sit in the same location just to allow you to breathe, for example, okay? The essence of human life, the first thing that happened to create Adam, the first man, by God breathing life into his nostrils. Truly. Biblical, okay? The truth of all things. That's really how it happened, okay? Don't believe me, as I say. Please don't, but truth is truth. Pants need to be entirely above the hips. Otherwise, there's restriction to the hips. Pants need to be slightly higher in the front than the rear for the waistband angle because that's the only way that our pelvis, meaning the hip structure, is shaped and would neutrally sit. Neutral, natural, normal, synonyms within the human being, okay? Yeah. Okay. Tops that we wear have seams on top of our shoulders. They have to sit evenly behind the peak of our shoulders. If there's a collar in our tops, which there's going to be, okay, if there's something around our neck, it has to be even. So a collar seam placed in there, we call it the dreaded collar seam under In The Image Clothing Company. Look up In The Image Clothing Company's dreaded collar seam modification. You have to have your collars stay centered. Otherwise, you cannot breathe. And all the musculature opposing the center of your body. Two things that I say, right? The sternum, the spine, the trachea, the nose, and our jaw, which naturally stabilizes the entire body. Those are the things that I say are the center. But the trachea and the spine are in the center of the neck. The top collar has to stay centered around the neck. Otherwise, the entire body to the tip of the toes and the tips of the fingers will be altered, okay? No say that you could ever have tip of the head as well, but it's just so close to the neck that it's like, a little bit more understandable. But yes, it goes to your feet. The ability for them to grip arches, for the ability for them to actually point forward the direction you're going. Yeah, okay. The edge seams of our tops have to sit evenly at the edges of our shoulders because that's just where the functionality of the shoulder joint is, and otherwise it just will not be able to function, okay? Two things we titled them prerequisites under In the Image Clothing Company. Weaving ropes across the top of the human foot is what we title In the Image Clothing Company's shoelace technique. The only way you can do that without altering the mechanics and operation of the human feet. Opposing the center line, gripping arches, keeping us vertical on Earth's gravity. We also tie shoes as well as human beings, and we do that evenly over toward the center on both sides of the body because there's two sides, so it has to be opposing knots. That wasn't a mocking voice. It was just, I say these things so often, meaning so many times I've said them, so I just say them a little bit differently each time. But I was 24 before I actually started tying my shoes evenly, so don't feel like you should have known how to, because we just don't know what we don't know. We can't be held accountable for what we don't know, okay? Now, secondly, our other prerequisite is to remove all tags from clothing included within shoes. Anywhere a tag is placed is either just causing a physical gap, changing the body's only working position, and or just not allowing musculature to activate because the nature of the material of the tag placed on the fabric of our clothing against our bodies. And then the body tries to compensate, and it cannot because it's all one. Okay, everything has a role to play, and everything has to do the only thing that it ever could because it's there for a reason, and that's all it could ever do. Designed by God. We have no say. Okay, we didn't design it, we can't decide it. The human being, Earth, life, okay, all the things that we know in this life here, yes, okay, God's design, not ours. We have no say. And so that's a big thing. Like I'm saying, episode 141, this one here of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, titled Physically Impossible. There's a lot of things that, like I just said a minute ago here, we don't know what we don't know when we cannot be held accountable for that, because how could you? If you don't know, then you don't know, okay? But this is one thing that's huge. If you have a heel under your heel, okay, meaning on your shoes, if your shoes are not exactly flat from toes to heel, as far as like the sole of the shoe that we walk on as human beings, it is physically impossible to have your body not be altered to the tip of your head and the tips of your fingers. If you picture the human feet standing on earth, flat, a heel on a shoe is just like placing a little block of wood, a little lump of mud, whatever it could be, a rock, anything. The height of what the heel of your shoe is underneath your actual heel and standing on it. Now trying to go through your entire life with that thing just underneath the heel of your foot. That's all you're doing. But it just doesn't seem so weird to us because it's become so common. But this is a big thing, is when you sit in a chair, oh my gosh. Okay, I talk about how sitting is unnatural for human beings, okay? Anytime there's weight on your muscles, they deactivate. Notice when I sit down, I sit on the ground. Right now, my bones are on my bones, okay? I'm sitting on the bottom of my hip structure, my pelvis. They're called sit bones or ischiums, our actual glutes, right? Which are the muscles, but the bones of our bottom, if you will, we sit on those, on the earth. Sit bones, they're commonly called. And then we can put the heels of our feet on the ground. Again, without any artificial heel on the shoe underneath our foot, so our heel is actually on the ground. Minus just the material of the sole if we're wearing shoes, okay? Now, I also sit with my elbows right on my knees, like this. And then I grasp my hands together and I put my right arm on top, because the right arm's almost always across the entirety of the earth, the one that's lower, more external, and farther away from the human being. So by placing it on top of the other hand, you're internally rotating it, elevating it, and activating it toward the center line of the body, okay? Yeah. Uneven shoe tying, right? Drawstring knots tied over toward the right. When there's a center line to the human being, we use the slipped lap knot. Under In the Image Clothing Company for drawstrings, tie the tail end to the center of the human body. But, right, the right-handed world. A video under them inside of In the Image Clothing Company, but also just the case, okay? We have a center line and we have to remain in it. Earth has gravity, and it's physically impossible for us to operate out of an imbalance. There's two lungs opposing the center, okay? We're constantly breathing. But this is the thing with heels on the shoes. Like I was saying, when you sit in a chair, it places weight on your hamstring muscles, the big muscles on the rear of your upper legs. I've been talking about this since the founding of the Image Clothing Company. People don't understand it a lot of the time in this part of the world. On this part of the earth is the best way to say that. A lot of parts of the earth, though, people just don't use chairs because their bodies work. They can sit in a deep low squat because that's extremely normal for the human being to do. It's just its full range of motion. Completely extended and completely contracted at every joint. That's just the full range that every joint of the body has within the motion that it can do. And it needs to, otherwise it's being inhibited and damaged by God's only working design. Meaning from that state, it's being altered, away from that. So it's physically impossible to keep muscles activated when you're pressing something into them, like sitting on a chair and there's weight on your hamstrings, okay? But what happens is at a chair height, your feet don't touch the floor flat, okay? So then if you place a heel under the shoe, now your feet can kind of be like on the floor to a degree, but it's an artificial angle. You've shortened the distance of your calves and you've changed the position of your hips, which are your pelvis, and it's gone forward, okay? Rotated forward in an anterior position. So that puts more activation on your quadricep muscles, which are your thighs, okay? The top of your legs. It pushes your shoulders forward. It excessively curves your spine. And so it snakes forward and back and then forward and then a little bit back again at the base of the skull from the base up, okay? The lumbar spine, which is the lowest part, comes forward when the pelvis is anterior. And then the center of the spine, the thoracic, comes back. And then at the cervical spine, the neck, it curves forward, and then it comes up into the base of the skull. And it just has to try to stay atop Earth's center of gravity, okay? Something that's physically impossible to do when there's only one neutral position to every joint in the human being, okay? And something that's physically impossible to do when a really, really large group of muscles, the hamstrings, is being cut into by an artificial man-made chair, and that muscle is just not allowed to activate, meaning that whole group of muscles going on behind the leg, on the upper part of it, okay? That bone's the femur, the upper part of the leg. And yeah, it comes up, and then, where the femurs come and meet into the hips, we have those sit bones. You can sit on bones, just like you can stand on bones. And that's what they're there for. And if you place a heel under your shoe, meaning under your actual physical body's heel, that's higher than your forefoot or your toes, or if you place something under the center of your foot that's higher than any other part of it that you want to claim as arch support, you cannot support the body. It's physically impossible to support the human being. It has to activate. It has to work. Muscles only contract. That's a video under the main side of In The Image Clothing Company's title. When you close your arm at your elbow, your biceps contract. When you extend your arm at your elbow, the muscles on the opposite side, your triceps, contract. Muscles only can ever shorten, okay? Stretch within clothing goes the opposite direction of the only way that muscles could ever work. As I say, we can never have stretch in our clothing. It didn't even exist just decades back from today's date. The 2nd of July, 2025. My birthday's on the 5th, bro. I'm going to be 26 years old, homie. On Saturday. So, there's some things that are just physically impossible that will never change. They couldn't. We cannot change laws of gravity. We cannot change the design of the human being. We didn't design it. We don't have a say to alter it and have it continue to work. People alter their bodies, and then a lot of physical complication comes from it, okay? Again, it's physically impossible to alter your body, like putting injections into it, implants into it, these type of things, okay? Complications come, undoubtedly, undisputedly, unavoidably. Yes, okay? So, there's some really big things, and there's some episodes of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled There Is Only One. Yeah. And some like that, where I talk about this. There's only one way to weave a rope across the top of the human foot, right? For example. But yeah, there's things that are just physically impossible. And it's crazy because if you have a heel under your foot, meaning a man-made elevation to the rear part of your shoe, higher than the front part of your shoe, underneath your foot, your knees are just taking a beating. The activations in your quads, which is the front of your body, when really the body dwells in its posterior chain, meaning a chain of muscles up the rear of the body. The calves, the hamstrings, the glutes, the back, which meaning like the trapezius muscles, the upper, mid, lower, pulling those shoulders back, and then they can be in their neutral position. We're not pulling shoulders back, but there's an episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled Being Behind Yourself. And when the human body's working naturally, it kind of feels like you're standing behind yourself, in the back seat of your body. Shoulders only ever work behind our head, okay? Shoulders follow shoulder seams. So the seams of our tops, like I say in the intros, sit behind the peak of our shoulders, which is actually just one end of our collarbone, and the other end comes down here to the sternum in the center of the front of the body. So it's physically impossible to even breathe. The only way the human being is designed to, okay, elevating the rib cage, getting these upper ribs open and expanded, getting the shoulders out of the way for the lungs to actually expand and open upward, getting those scapulas, the big bones on our upper back, in their only working position behind the rib cage, closer to the spine than they often get, when the trapezius muscles that connect from the shoulders to the spine get stretched out. Tags in the rear of collars, stretch within clothing, shoulder seams coming in front of the shoulders will just follow the seams. The shoulders are those scapula bones, okay? That's what makes up the shoulder capsule. The collarbone, the scapula, the humerus, which is the upper arm bone, okay? Skeletal system-wise, this is like a test, right? Does he really know the anatomy of the human body? Evan Strong sits there on the floor of bedrooms and films episodes of what he calls In the Image Clothing Company podcast. He likes to claim he knows what he's talking about. Well, it doesn't matter if I claim it or not. It doesn't matter if I'm right or not. Truth is truth, and this is how the body works, and always has for every human ever to live, and always will be the same because God designed it. And God is eternal. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So, that's what I say, though, about that dreaded collar seam modification. It's impossible to even breathe with a collar that doesn't sit evenly around our neck, because there's diaphragms in the neck as well as down in our abdomen, and they just need to stay even. The head's supported by the neck, and the musculature just needs to be able to contract evenly, okay? Those of you watching in visual plus audio, rather than those of you just in audio only of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, you can see this. I can like activate the muscles going from my jaw down into my neck by just, like clenching my jaw, well, with it open, meaning like just activating the muscles of my neck. It's physically impossible to breathe normal if your neck can't support your head normal, because there's clothing placed on your shoulders, pulling them unevenly away from your spine, which is in the center of your human body on Earth's gravity, that has a center that it pulls on things in. Look at little Red the guitar here leaning against the wall. If I were to lean Red the guitar over a little bit, he would just fall over like a tree. Gravity. Earth, the human body, a physical vessel for our spirit bodies to dwell within, to take us across this earth in this life we've been given. That's it. That's all we are, bro. No opinion. So there's just a level of things that is physically impossible that's absurd, because your core can never deactivate as a human being. The core, I used to say this often, of the human body is like the core of an apple. The core of an apple is where the seeds are. That's how the apple grows. If you take the core out of an apple, the apple will wither away and die. If an apple's on a tree and you cut part of it off, it can probably still continue to grow. It'll heal over the part that got cut off pretty well. But the core is the core. I mean, that word, what that means is like, it's like the root, right? It's like the powerhouse. It's where things stem from. The stem, yes, literal, right? It's like the gospel of Jesus Christ. When we talk about parables, they are literal. They're actually word for word what they mean, but we just don't see it often. Where the apple stems from is what we call the stem of the apple, which goes straight into the core of the apple. The human body, oh my gosh, check this out. The core of the human being can never deactivate. Otherwise, you can't breathe. That's it, okay? Meaning your body still is trying to, because if you're alive, you're doing some form of breathing. But your entire body stabilizes every single breath you ever take. Anywhere any part of the body goes, all of it comes. There's no compensation that can happen within the human being because it's all one. Everything has a role to play. It's like watching a play, and the understudy's understudy doesn't show up. The play just doesn't play out. Do you see what I mean? I've said these things like this many times before. The human body can only ever work activated as an entirety, meaning the whole thing all together, always. Now, this is the whole point of the core of the human being. It's in the center of the body, okay? We have a brain stem that stems electrical currents, okay, the nervous system, through the spine, from the brain, down through the core or the center of the body, out to all the extremities, to the tips of the fingers and the tips of the toes. Again, literal terminology. The brain stem feeds the core of the body, and then it can then feed everything out. The stem of the apple feeds the core of the apple, then it can feed everything from there out. Okay? There's things that are physically impossible. And no amount of mantras and meditations and breath work and new age garbage is ever going to change God. You have no say, and neither do I. There's an episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled We Have No Say. Jesus Christ is our God, and he is who he says that he is. And we can know that by reading his living word, okay? Read the word of God, an episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast's title. So, it's physically impossible for the human body to just work in a position it doesn't. And I've said this many times, but this is the basis of In the Image Clothing Company. This is the whole main side of In the Image Clothing Company. And it's called the main side because this is the main thing. The main thing is to keep the main thing, right? People say that phrase. I don't need to quote exactly one person. Many people have said it. Jesus Christ is the main thing, always. And really, what Jesus Christ is a man. A body of flesh and bone. He's also our God, yes. One God is an episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast's title. But the body has to remain in its neutrals and everything. So, the point with the core and shoe heels is your core will never, literally, period and done, never. No say that I could have, he could have, she, they, them, that, this, and those, and the other thing that they're trying to claim to make up. No. Truth is truth. On Earth's gravity, there's a human body. There's just a mechanical machine. It only has one position it could ever actually activate in. If you place a heel underneath your foot on a shoe, your core will be constantly and permanently within that shoe deactivated. It is impossible physically, mechanically, to activate your core stemming from your feet and traveling up to the tip of your head and the tips of your fingers if there's something underneath your heel of your actual foot that is higher than your toes. If we just look at gravity, you look at something that's just perfectly, let's say if we could, nothing perfect besides our God, straight up like this, okay? If you place something underneath that that's angled, that thing will just fall forward. The human body will just be falling forward if there's anything even just at all different in height from heel to toe placed underneath it. Just try to stand on a hill with your heels higher so your toes are pointing downhill and your body has to lean backward. Yeah, just to stay vertical with gravity, right? I mean, this is just how it is. It's gravity. It's mechanics. It's physics. That's what In The Image Clothing Company really is. That's really what we discuss, is those things. Truly. Under the main side, that's how you get to the anatomy of the human body. There's no medications or supplements or pills or diets that will ever help the human being mechanically function. It's gravity, neutrals, and a center line. That's really how you get the human body to work, okay? Is just let those things remain. That's what I say. We don't ever, I've never, up until today's date, and we won't. I mean, you cannot give exercises to try to train the human being. No, all we do is show how to get out of chronic patternings. Just rid scar tissue, give information on where the restriction's coming from, and stop it. So it's just physically impossible to actually have your body work. And it's dumbfounding because chiropractors will be doing adjustments to people while these people are within shoes that have heels on them, or you know, wearing drawstrings around their waist. There's just a knot of a rope twisting their entire center, core, pelvis, traveling through their whole body. Okay, it's dumbfounding. It's crazy. And then people will try to come up with all these programs and whatever, claiming it's going to help you, and it's just physically impossible. You know, sometimes people shy away from saying that. They're like, I don't want to say stuff's impossible because it's limiting. No, there are physical impossibilities. There are, truly, actually. There's universal laws, and there's God who put things in place that we have no say over. And you have to be able to see that, otherwise you'll live in a life that's not being accusatious when I'm saying this, but it's a delusion. People trying so hard to do things thinking that, I mean, if they just believe it'll work, then it will, but there's only one truth. There's only one God, Jesus Christ. And this is that thing where it's like, well, how do you have a say then? Maybe you're just the one in the delusion. That's what I mean, is you have to see things as they are. I'm not deciding any of this. I'm not trying to get you to believe it. I'm not trying to convince you. I'm showing things as they are when we remove all the opinions. And this is a beautiful example of that. There's things that are just physically impossible. So a big thing is resting the human being. Like I'm saying, there's only one way the human body could ever work, and it's activated as a whole. If you rest your arms on something, it deactivates not just your arms, but then that travels up into your shoulders. And now if your shoulder deactivates, your shoulders are muscles that support your head. So now half of your body that still always and only can ever have a center line on Earth's gravity has deactivated. If you rest one of your arms on something, and then your head which is just the tallest point on the body on Earth's gravity, is missing half of one side of it, all that support. Now what? There's still a center of gravity. There's still a spine that each of the sides of the body's musculature connect to in the very center. You can never rest your body on things. There's no opinion to this. There's no ideal world that I'm trying to have here. This is just the only way the human body could ever work. Dumbfounding to me that we can get as far off as we are. I was very, very far off as well. Again, I'm not speaking as if I'm above others, but I know things deeper than other people do if people aren't seeing this. Okay? That's why I founded In The Image Clothing Company, to allow the body to work. So, you can never rest your arms on a tabletop or on your own legs or on an arm rest in a chair. It's physically impossible for your body to even work. Half of one side of it has deactivated. There's still always and only ever two sides to the human being. Maybe you're missing an arm. Maybe you're missing a leg. Maybe you have a very deformed body. That's okay. That's your situation. And you already are working around it because you have to. And again, this information applies to those people as well. No human being on the earth is excluded from what we talk about under In The Image Clothing Company, because I talk about, again, gravity and its center. Okay? You're missing half your body. Well, you have to do all that you can to get your body evenly balanced weight-wise for the sake of gravity, something that's apart from all of us, aka truth. Okay? That's what I say. Truth is apart from all of us. None of us could ever have a say over it. Ever in this life. I mean, it's literally not something that could happen at all by any of us. Okay? So don't believe me. Truly, please do not. But I'm speaking the truth here. Yeah, okay, so there's things that are just physically impossible. And that's why, I made a video in the fall of 2024 under the main site of In The Image Clothing Company, and I titled it, Rest Weakens the Body. And it does. If you're trying to rest the body in something like a recliner chair or on a couch that's all uneven and your body's out of its only neutral positions, okay? How clothing affects blood circulation is a video I made last week under the main site of In The Image Clothing Company. I talked about that. There's veins, arteries, capillaries, meaning vessels, tubes, delivering blood through the entire body, and they go through joints of bones connecting. And if those joints aren't in their only neutral position, then the blood flow will be cut off, okay? And now your body's just damaged in the instant. And then it can travel into deeply ingrained chronic patterning that gets built up through scar tissue in the body. Okay, a shortening of muscles, excessive elongating, meaning stretching of other muscles, right? Because there's opposing muscles, which is also a video title under the main site of In The Image Clothing Company. And that's what I was saying with the elbow earlier, okay? Opposing muscles in every function of the body, otherwise it can't work, because there's opposition in all things, as we say within the gospel of Jesus Christ, aka the truth of all things. No religion, no opinion, truth. None of us get to decide. It will never change. Okay, so there's some things that are physically impossible because rest does weaken the body if you're claiming to rest the body in a position that it could never actually work in. The body has to always reside in its neutrals. It just has to. It couldn't do anything else. So when you're sleeping, right, like the episode of In The Image Clothing Company podcast titled Sleeping Truths, you have to sleep on something entirely flat. I mean, it can have some cushion to it, but not to a degree to where it curves your spine, right? Or other parts of your body like that. So, there's things that are physically impossible, and we have to accept that. Otherwise, you are living in a delusion. Otherwise, you're spending time doing things like workouts, altering your body, running, within shoes that have heels under them. Under your feet, right, is the point. There's an episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled Running. I went over it pretty in depth in that episode, okay? Yeah, people just didn't even run until like the 1970s. And it's because the structure of the world changed and our lifestyles did. The human being actually gets damaged by running. And a lot of that, comparing that to animals, is most animals that run often have 4 legs. Human beings only have 2 that we use to run. Just mechanically, you're jarring all of the joints through your entire body. And also you're leaning forward out of your body's only neutral position on Earth's gravity, because animals are still on top of all of their limbs while they're running. If they have 4 of them, and like, you know, the front ones are coming back and the back ones are coming forward like a dog or a cat. But human beings, we stand vertical and then you run leaning forward. You see what I mean? It's physically impossible to train the human being. It's just what it is. All we can ever do is allow it to work. So, anyway, I think that's probably where I'll leave this. This is what I mean. How humbled I get by this, regardless of how prideful I am in whatever moment. These things humble me to see that there's no way I could ever have an opinion over what we do under In the Image Clothing Company. And also to see that no matter who, quote unquote, believes that what we're doing here works or not, it's truth, eternal and unchanging. Okay, so today's the 2nd of July, 2025. My name is Evan Strong, the founder of In the Image Clothing Company. This will be a beautiful one to refer people back to, episode 141 of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, titled Physically Impossible. Okay, so stick around for the poodles. Check out any of the other 3 sides of In the Image Clothing Company if you'd like to. Please keep your feet flat on the earth. 0 drop is the term they use for shoes that don't have any elevation heel to toe. Okay, any brand of them. So, yeah, thank you.